Emilia Perez initially came out to a wave of critical success. It premiered at the Cannes Film Festival, it won the Best Actress Award, the Jury Prize, Best Soundtrack Award, and even was nominated for the Palme d'Or. The American Film Institute named it one of their top films of 2024, and it was nominated for 13 Oscars. However, if you go on any major review site, such as Letterboxd or Rotten Tomatoes, it is being panned by the general public. Most people I've spoken to only know it from the infamous vaginoplasty song that went rightfully viral on TikTok earlier this year. And I hate to be the one to tell you this, but that is the best song in the movie. The film is full of bad songs, is surrounded by controversies, and worst of all, it's simply boring. At 2 hours and 10 minutes, this movie is an absolute slog. So why are critics in love with it, and why does it have almost as many Oscar nominations as Titanic?
To fully answer that question, we first have to talk about how the Oscars operate. We've all heard of the phrase Oscar bait movie, but what makes a movie Oscar bait? Typically, Oscar bait movies are biopics about a topical subject, have grandiose music, well-known actors, and most of all, a surface-level exploration of a certain topic. Let me give you a couple of examples. Green Book is the most popular one. It is a movie that boils down to racism's bad. Don't Look Up, Trump's bad. Promising Young Woman, sexual assault's bad. Hidden Figures, racism's bad. The Whale, fat shaming's bad. I can go on and on. I've seen all these movies, and most of all, they are all forgettable and boring. The Oscars also love giving an actor or director an ode award. Jamie Lee Curtis is a perfect example of this. She got her Oscar for Everything Everywhere All at Once. I love that movie, and I think she did a great job. However, she is nowhere near the best female performance in the movie. But she's a legend for being in the industry so long, for Halloween, and the Academy wanted to give her an award for all her efforts. Brendan Fraser is unfortunately another great example of this. He was practically blacklisted for the industry for over a decade because he came out about his sexual assault in 2003 by the president of the Hollywood Foreign Press Association. Work completely dried up for him. He then eventually comes back about a decade later with a grandiose performance in The Whale and wins his Oscar for it. I like Brendan Fraser, and I think what happened to him was awful, but I don't think throwing an award at him years later is making up for what he suffered through. The awards at the Oscars are never just about the movies, no matter what people say, and this isn't a new phenomenon either. In 1941, John Ford's How Green Was My Valley won over Citizen Kane. One of those movies is shown in every film seminar across the globe, and the other one is How Green Was My Valley. The Academy didn't want to give arrogant, annoying 26-year-old Orson Welles Best Director for his debut film. They didn't appreciate his attitude, and he thought he knew better than Hollywood. But there's a reason that 77 years later in my freshman film seminar class, I was watching Citizen Kane and being told how it revolutionized the industry. So with that context now in mind, let's get back into Emilia Perez. First, I'm going to do a quick plot synopsis, so if you've seen the movie, feel free to skip ahead, but I'm just going to hit the main beats here. The movie starts off following Rita, who is Zoe Saldana's character and is a lawyer. She is underpaid and underappreciated for her work, and she's getting frustrated with this. She is then kidnapped and taken to a drug lord who is named Manitas, and that's their last name, which is what I'll call them. Manitas reveals that they're a trans woman and needs Rita's help to transition. They need to fake their own death, relocate their family, and relocate themselves to a completely new country and specify not Mexico or the US. In return for her work, Rita will become rich, and she jumps at this opportunity. She then travels to Thailand, where we have the infamous vaginoplasty song, and she learns about the different surgeries that trans people get to feel gender affirmed. Rita eventually finds a doctor she'd like to work with, but the doctor is skeptical about working with a patient that he won't know who they are and their true identity. He says he can perform these surgeries, but he can't change a person's gender. Rita then disagrees to camera and practically tells the audience that she is an ally to trans people. So the doctor wants to meet the patient he will be working with, so Rita and the doctor go to Mexico to meet Manitas, and are kidnapped and taken to Manitas' location. Manitas then fakes their death, Rita is paid a large sum for her work, and the surgeries happen all at once. Manitas then is woken up, covered in bandages, practically like a mummy, checks out her genitals, is happy about it and the surgery she's undergone, and then tells the audience that she is now going to go by Emilia Perez. Years later, while they're in London for work, Rita and Emilia meet up. They don't recognize each other at first because Rita hasn't seen Emilia after her surgeries, but eventually they get to talking and know who each other are. Emilia then says she needs Rita's help to reunite herself with her family, and she misses them so much, so she would like her help again. The story that the two come up with is that Emilia is a long-lost aunt, and Emilia's family will be returning to Mexico to live with her, and Rita comes along as well. They all return to Mexico to live with Emilia, but when Emilia gets very familiar with her ex-wife and children, her ex-wife, who's played by Selena Gomez, is immediately suspicious, having never heard of this secret aunt, and why she is so familiar with her family all of a sudden. Emilia is then faced with a reminder while out with Rita about how these people in Mexico are missing family members due to cartel violence and are unable to be reunited with their loved ones after death. She starts using her connections to cartel to get insider information to help reunite these families with their dead loved ones. She also, during this time, starts a lesbian love affair with one of these victims who has been abused by her ex. Jessie, who's played by Selena Gomez, also does a similar thing. She reunites with an ex-lover and rekindles a romance there. Jessie is then getting more and more suspicious of Emilia Perez. The two of them have an altercation because Emilia herself is not happy that Jessie is having a relationship because she feels jealous, and Emilia doesn't want to let Jessie leave when she is eventually scared and take the children, so she then gets violent. Emilia is then taken hostage by Jessie and her lover that she's reunited with, and Rita has to bring ransom money to get Emilia free. Then there's a violent shootout. Emilia reveals her past to Jessie. They drive off a cliff and die. The movie then ends with a memorial parade for Emilia, organized by her lesbian lover that she found later in life. After this movie received its whopping 13 Oscar nominations, controversies about it started coming out and piling up. The director of the film is French, and this film is set in Mexico and covers real-world issues that are happening in Mexico. However, none of the main cast or crew are Mexican themselves. And I personally don't think that you have to be a race to tell a certain story, but it does matter to have the correct representation and understanding of the topic that you are covering in your film. This movie uses Mexico and cartel violence as simply a plot point and backdrop to the plot of this film, and is not a developed understanding of what really is going on. And when you, as the director of the film, go on record saying Spanish is a language of developing countries, it's a language of few means, of poor people, of migrants, that's not a great look. There are real people who are missing their family members and just want to be able to put them to rest. So I think it's pretty insensitive to have your main character be the one who enacts all this violence, but is then later forgiven for her sins because she just transitions as a woman and starts a charity to undo a fraction of the pain that she herself has caused. These people just want to be able to bury their family members in peace, and I think they've been through enough without you making a mockery of them and their struggles in your film. The actress who plays Emilia, Carlos Sofia Gascon, has also been at the center of a lot of these controversies herself. After the movie came out, some of her old tweets have resurfaced, and they are being called racist. I personally couldn't find a lot of articles that would link or quote these tweets. They were just simply calling them racist tweets. Gascon says that she is being a victim of cancel culture and people are trying to tear her down with baseless claims. I personally don't like cancel culture. I think that people should be held accountable for their actions, but I do also think that the internet lends to a lot of dogpiling on things that were one-time incidents and not people being truly bad people. And how bad could these tweets even be? I mean, she was cast in this movie, she's a famous actress, and she seems to have a healthy career. I really think that very few people ever cared about George Floyd, a drug addict swindler, but his death has served to once again demonstrate that there are people who still consider black people to be monkeys without rights and consider policemen to be assassins, she posted. They're all wrong. Oh man. Why would you post that? Why would you say that? More and more, the hashtag Oscars are looking like a ceremony for independent and protest films. I didn't know if I was watching the Afro-Korean Festival, a Black Lives Matter demonstration, or the 8M. Apart from that, an ugly, ugly gala. You hit post, and now you're gonna be there? I'm sure that won't be incredibly awkward at all. This has gotten so bad that even her fellow cast and crew members are publicly distancing themselves from her. The director, who we've already established has his own controversies, he himself has called her playing the victim and said that she's talking about herself as a victim, which is surprising. It's as if she thought that words don't hurt. Odiard has even gone on record saying that he hasn't spoken to Gascon after these controversies. Even communities that you would expect to champion and love this movie are turning away from it. It is a movie that is focused on a trans character, and Gascon herself is the first trans woman to be nominated for the Best Actress at the Oscars. However, she herself seems determined to push away all of her fans. She has gone on record saying to trans writers who have criticized her film, if you don't like it, go and make your own movie. The trans community was frustrated with how things about being trans were depicted in this film, but Gascon refused to take any of that criticism to heart and make all of her supporters into haters. Now, getting into my personal experience with this movie, I had seen it after the controversies came out, but I really did try and go into it with an open mind. So here are a couple of things I did enjoy about the film. I liked how it was mixed. It was mixed very well in a way that created a 360 environment when you were listening. The songs did actually develop the plot along, and I do like that they cast a trans actress to play the lead. I do think that they probably wish they'd cast any other trans actress, but hindsight's 2020. However, my list of complaints is a little bit longer. First, I'll talk about my general complaints with the filmmaking and then get into some niche community complaints. If you tell someone a quick synopsis of this story, it's about a drug lord who wants to change their life and transition, it sounds really interesting, but this film is so boring. I think a big reason that I found this film so boring is I knew next to nothing about the characters. Take Rita, for example. She is offered this large sum of money to help Emilia, and she jumps at the opportunity to get this financial support. However, we have not been shown that she is struggling financially in any way. In the beginning, we're shown that she is underappreciated and underpaid, but we see her apartment, it seems nice enough, and she doesn't seem to be struggling. However, when she is eventually paid for her work of helping Emilia, she breaks down into tears because she is so grateful to have this money. This seems like it was supposed to be a big moment that really was built up to and paid off, but I didn't understand what the importance was. Sure, it's nice to be a millionaire, but we weren't shown that Rita needed this money. It seemed like a moment that was supposed to be built up to have some big payoff, but it just wasn't landing for me. Similarly, I don't understand Rita's motivation to help Emilia. It is a very dangerous job, and she doesn't seem to be shown very much about caring about the trans community until she tells us that to camera, that she is an ally to trans people when talking to that doctor. And then she later goes back and lives with Emilia and spends time with her when she returns to Mexico post-transition. But are these women friends? Are they business associates? The relationship between them is really not established, and they are the two main characters in this movie. But even after watching it, I wasn't sure how close they really were. Emilia herself also has this same issue. She has these major changes of heart with seemingly no cause. Before she transitioned, she was a drug lord and very violent, but then once she returns to Mexico, she meets one mother of one victim of cartel violence, and then she suddenly starts this charity to help people. It is a very unmotivated change, and I don't really know what causes it. She also similarly talks about how much she misses her family, and her children miss her when she's gone, but there's really no relationship established between them. It's just assumed that they're close because they are family. And a lot of the plot points in the film progress this way. Things are happening because the movie needs to happen, not because a character is naturally making a choice for something to continue on. On to my trans-focused complaints. I am trans-masc and non-binary, and I take pride in that. So I was very frustrated by the representation that is shown in this movie. It is constantly focused on surgery, and that surgery is the end-all, be-all of a trans person's life. There's many different ways to be trans, and some of those include surgery and some don't. But that's not everyone's experience. At the start of the movie, Emilia describes herself as a man wanting to become a woman when talking to Rita. However, she also tells Rita that she has been on estrogen for 2 years. That's not typically the timeline that goes down. Usually trans people are frustrated and feeling this disassociation with who they are, then start identifying with the correct label, and then may start hormones. Rarely is it done out of order just because you want to fix an emotional issue first and then fix the gender dysphoria that you're feeling that may be causing those emotional issues. This may seem like I'm nitpicking, but it's a small thing that is well known to most trans people, and if you had done good research on the topic, you would have known this. As these issues start piling up, you'll see why these nitpicking ones get frustrating for me. Another thing that's similar to this is Emilia's children talk about missing their father, and that Emilia smells like their father. And once again, a very small issue and doesn't take you out of the story unless you would know about this, but one of the first things people say about starting hormones is that it changes your scent. So once again, those details are small and not necessarily transphobic, but just demonstrate a general lack of understanding on what it means to be trans. So as this film shows more and more inaccurate trans representation or harmful trans representation, it gets more and more unacceptable. This movie basically hits all of the main tropes that trans characters usually go through in media as well. Emilia is a trans killer, similar to Silence of the Lambs. She is a tragic character who is killed at the end of her own story, which is burying your gaze, a very well-known trope. She is also described as half woman, half man. She is misgendered at crucial points of the story by friends and enemies, and it is never addressed. And transitioning is also seen as death, so much so that Emilia fakes her own death for her transition. So this is just to say that this movie isn't really saying anything new. These are all tropes that have been done countless times in other movies, and it's not really bringing anything original to the conversation. First of all, at the end of this movie, Emilia gets physically violent. I want to be clear when I talk about this, I don't think that all trans characters should be perfect people that don't ever have any flaws, because that would be boring in the opposite way. But I've seen other people talk about this movie saying the representation is that it's a trans character that isn't perfect, and that's great and progressive. However, Emilia is shown to be physically violent, lowering her voice intentionally, these stereotypically masculine traits that we haven't seen her show since her transition. In a time where trans people are being targeted by legislation and being physically assaulted in the streets, this movie is straight up irresponsible. It shows its main trans character as violent under the surface, a liar to the people who are closest to her, and capable of great harm. When the current rhetoric in the United States is that trans women are just men in disguise, trying to get into women's bathrooms or women's sports to physically assault or beat the real women, this movie is dangerous. We should have complex trans characters instead of these boring, lifeless saints. But when trans people only make up 1% of the population, this could be someone's and will be someone's first experience with a trans story. So they will see this as the major truth. They will see, and it will confirm their negative beliefs about trans people. They'll say, look, even that liberal Hollywood movie confirms that trans people are liars. Trans people can be violent. So it must be the same in real life. If the liberals are saying that this is a popular, accurate movie, that's what it means to be trans. So when these trans people go to prison and they say they want to go to a women's prison instead of a men's prison, they probably just want what's nicer. That lady in the movie used her transition to get away from all the mistakes that she made in her past. So why should my tax dollars pay for their transition? That's incredibly selfish. When people say representation matters, that doesn't only apply to good representation. Negative representation has negative impacts on real people as well. In a time where the trans community has been through so much and are simply trying to stay alive and stay safe, this movie is dangerous. And I'm sure it would have won a lot of awards if it wasn't for the controversies. People would have said, oh, Trump is being so mean to these trans people. We should give them an award for their little movie, just like they have in the past. It's nothing new. So I think we should all say thank you to Carlos Sofia Gascon for tanking this transphobic-ass movie with all of her racist tweets. It may have been the best thing she's ever done for the trans community. Alright, I hope you enjoyed. This was a lot of fun to write, to get interested in. I really enjoyed researching this. If you'd be interested in checking out the sources I used, I'm going to link a lot of the articles I found interesting in the description. And also, I highly recommend you see some other really great trans representation movies that aren't Emilia Perez and have really great representation. I have a list of a couple of them, one of which is The Matrix, a popular trans movie that, without really knowing it was a trans movie when it was being written. But some other recommendations are also going to be Will and Harper, which is on Netflix, a documentary that came out earlier this year. I saw the TV Glow, which was snubbed by a lot of awards and had a really big impact on my personal life. I've also been meaning to check out The People's Joker. I've heard people really, really like that and say it's an amazing trans story. And Disclosure, that came out in 2020, I've heard great things about, and I've been meaning to check out as well. So I hope you enjoyed, and I'll be back with other rants or things about things when I feel like it. Have a great day. Thanks for hanging out.